Her parents sold her like defective livestock for being unable to bear children, trading her freedom for 200 miserable silver pesos while she wept blood on the adobe floor. 6 years of sterile marriage had turned her womb into a curse and her name into a whisper of shame that followed the family like a shadow of sin. The taste of copper filled her mouth as Abundio's fist connected with her jaw, sending her crashing against the wall like a broken doll. "A woman who cannot give children is not a woman," he roared, his breath reeking of mezcal and hatred. "She's like barren land that serves not even to grow weeds." His words cut deeper than any blade, each syllable a nail driven into the coffin of her self-worth. At 22, Citlali's name meant star in Nahuatl, but her light had been extinguished under the weight of 6 miscarriages that had left invisible scars where life should have bloomed. The midwife had pronounced the sentence that morning like an executioner reading condemnations. "Nothing again, girl. If you haven't borne fruit in 6 years, you never will." Her words pierced Citlali's soul like rusty nails. The woman's eyes held a mixture of pity and contempt that she knew too well, the look reserved for broken things that couldn't be fixed. Whispers followed her through the hacienda corridors like serpents crawling on stone. "Cursed," the servants murmured, crossing themselves. "God's punishment for some terrible sin." Each word was another stab in a heart that had been bleeding from within. But what had been her sin? Being born a woman, dreaming of motherhood, loving a man who saw her as breeding stock? The betrayal came dressed as parental love when her parents appeared in a cart that creaked like old bones under the weight of their shame. Florencio couldn't look her in the eyes when he spoke, as if guilt were contagious. "We met a merchant from Sonora," he mumbled while Dolores wept crocodile tears. "He needs a woman for his house." The universe collapsed upon Citlali like a mountain of stones. "A woman or a slave?" she asked with a voice she didn't recognize as her own. Her parents exchanged complicit glances that told her everything she needed to know. "He offered us 200 silver pesos," her mother confessed, like someone confessing murder. "It's a lot of money, daughter, more than you're worth here." The words fell like acid on open wounds, burning what little remained of her soul. Fortune de Villegas arrived that afternoon, like death dressed in mourning. His small eyes evaluated Citlali like someone examining cattle at market, weighing pounds of flesh against silver coins. The cane with its silver handle marked each step like hammer blows on a coffin. "So this is the girl," he said, circling her like a vulture, sniffing carrion. "She looks strong, healthy. Her hands aren't too rough. Can she read a little?" Florencio answered for her, as if Citlali had lost the ability to speak for herself. The humiliation spread like a bloodstain on white cloth. Villegas walked around her, evaluating her with a gaze that made her feel dirty to her bones. "And it's confirmed she cannot bear children?" The question cut through the air like a rusty razor. The silence that followed was so dense it seemed solid. "Yes, sir," her mother murmured. "The doctor confirmed it, but she's very hard-working, very obedient." "Better that way," Villegas grunted with a smile that froze blood. "Fertile women bring problems, suitors, scandals. This one will be perfect for what I need." He pulled out a leather pouch and slowly counted 200 silver pesos on the table. The metallic sound of coins resonated in the silence like funeral bells tolling for her dead freedom. "The deal is done," Villegas declared, storing the papers he had prepared as if it were a cattle transaction. "The girl comes with me tomorrow at dawn. Let her bring only the essentials. In my house she'll have everything she needs." His words promised a life that Citlali knew would be worse than death itself. That night, while packing her few belongings in a palm fiber bundle, each object seemed to bid her farewell. Her hands trembled as she folded her 2 dresses, her wool shawl, and the few jewels her grandmother had left her. Each memory became another stab in her shattered heart. Her mother entered without knocking, eyes swollen from shedding false tears. "Citlali, daughter, you have to understand." "There's nothing to understand, mother," Citlali interrupted without turning around. "You sold me. It's that simple. Like a cow, like a goat, like any animal that no longer serves any purpose. Someday you'll forgive us," Dolores whispered. "Someday you'll understand we did it out of love." Citlali turned then, and her mother stepped back, seeing the glacial coldness in her eyes. "Love isn't for sale, mother. What you did today has no name in any human language." The words came out like cutting ice, each syllable a death sentence for the relationship they had once shared. At dawn the following day, Citlali climbed into Fortunato Villegas's cart without looking back. Her parents stood in the hacienda's doorway like salt statues, but she kept her eyes fixed on the horizon. The merchant cracked the reins, and the horses set off, carrying her toward a destiny she feared more than hell itself. During the 3-day journey to Sonora, Villegas explained her duties with a smile that promised unnamed tortures. She would have to rise before dawn to prepare breakfast, clean the house from top to bottom, wash clothes, cook all meals, attend to visitors, and when he deemed it necessary, accompany him at night so he wouldn't feel lonely. He spoke the last words with a smile that chilled blood to the bone. Citlali understood then the true nature of her situation. She wasn't a housekeeper. She was a slave, a woman bought and paid for to satisfy all the whims of a man who saw her as an object of his personal property. The ranch of Villegas smelled of rancid sweat and rotting dreams. The room he assigned her was smaller than a coffin, with a window so tiny that barely any hope could fit through it. The first 2 months were a waking nightmare. Each day brought new humiliation, a new wound in her already shattered soul. Her hands, once soft as silk, were now rough and cracked from constant work. Her eyes had lost the last trace of hope that remained, and her spirit had become as arid as the desert surrounding the property. Villegas had proven to be even worse than she feared in her worst nightmares. During the day, he treated her like an invisible servant, shouting at her for any insignificant detail, hitting her when the food wasn't to his perfect taste. But the nights were the real hell that consumed her slowly. The man would arrive smelling of mezcal and cruelty, constantly reminding her that he had bought her like someone buys tools. "Remember that no one will look for you if you disappear," he would whisper with nauseating breath while she curled up in her cot. "Your own parents sold you. No one in this world wants you, except me, and only because you serve me as I please." But that December dawn, something had changed in Citlali, like a ray of clarity piercing darkness. While preparing breakfast in the kitchen, with fresh bruises on her arms that she no longer even tried to hide, she heard Villegas talking with a visitor about getting another younger girl, because this one is already too worn out. The words hit her like deadly lightning. If she stayed, she would die slowly in this house, consumed by cruelty and contempt. But if she fled, at least she would die free. She waited until Villegas left for town with his visitor to see some available girls. With trembling but determined hands like tempered steel, she wrapped in a shawl some stale bread, dried meat, and a water canteen. She took the small kitchen knife and the few pesos she had managed to save by secretly cleaning for neighbors. The sun barely peeked over the horizon when Citlali crossed the ranch's back door for the last time. Her bare feet sank into the cold dawn sand as she walked away toward the mountains that rose like sleeping giants in the distance. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she had to get as far away as possible before Villegas discovered her escape. She walked for hours under the rising sun that soon became merciless as a fire hammer. The Sonora desert doesn't forgive the weak, and Citlali wasn't prepared for its pitiless ferocity. By midday, she had drunk half her water, and the heat began playing cruel tricks on her mind. Rocks seemed to move, air rippled like poisoned water. Her steps became clumsy like a drunk person's. "Dear God," she murmured, falling to her knees on sand that burned like red-hot iron. "If I'm going to die, let it be with dignity, let it be free." She continued crawling forward, driven by a force she didn't know she possessed, a blind determination to die standing rather than live kneeling. The afternoon sun beat her without mercy, and her lips were so dry they had begun to bleed like red flowers in the desert. The canteen had emptied hours ago, and now she only had the blind determination not to be defeated. The wind brought her voices that might be spirits or madness. It didn't matter which. When she finally collapsed, the world became a kaleidoscope of nameless colors. She saw her grandmother calling her from mountains that were clouds, oases that disappeared when she extended supplicating hands, her own funeral, where no one cried because no one had loved her enough to shed real tears. And then, When death seemed ready to claim her as a patient lover, a figure on horseback appeared that could be angel or demon. A tall man with skin bronzed by desert suns, black hair falling like an obsidian cascade to shoulders marked by war scars. But what struck her most were the 3 small children who rode with him like hope made flesh. Nikali had been following the trail of a wounded deer. When he saw human footprints staggering aimlessly, his warrior instinct screamed trap, but his father's heart whispered help. Mexican soldiers sometimes used women as bait, but this one was truly dying under a sun that didn't lie. The decision to help her could cost his family their lives. "Papa, there's someone there," said Itzel, pointing to a dark spot that could be rock or person. Her 9 years had seen enough death to recognize it from afar. Nikali squinted, studying the motionless figure, calculating dangers like a predator evaluates terrain. His father's heart fought against his protector's duty. "Stay back," he ordered Yoretzi and Akatl, his 6- and 4-year-old children, who had learned to obey when survival depended on silence. "Itzel, come with me but stay alert." They approached like hunters approaching a trap, each step calculated to allow quick escape if necessary. Citlali lay unconscious, skin reddened like burned meat, lips cracked and bleeding like withered red flowers. Her torn dress revealed bruises that clearly didn't come from a desert fall. The story of abuse was written on her body like a map of suffering that any Apache woman would know how to read. "She's very sick, Papa," Itzel murmured with compassion that broke hearts. "Look at her lips. She's going to die if we don't help her." The girl had inherited her dead mother's sensitivity to recognize others' pain. Her words touched the deepest fiber of Nikali's soul, where lived the values that Tulali had taught him. "She's Mexican," he murmured more to himself than to his daughter. "She could bring soldiers, problems, death to our family." But Itzel looked at him with eyes that were mirrors of her dead mother's soul. "Mama said that wounded women deserve help no matter who hurt them." The childish wisdom cut like a sword through his doubts. The mention of Tulali unleashed memories that were sweet agony. His wife had been compassion-made woman, a healer of broken hearts, mother not only to his children, but to any lost soul who found refuge in her love. She had raised her children with those values before illness took her away, leaving an impossible void to fill. He carried Citlali in his arms, surprised by how light she was, like a bird with broken wings that had forgotten how to fly. He lifted her onto his horse, holding her against his chest that beat with life's rhythm, while she barely breathed with whispers of death. "Let's go home," he murmured. "We have a guest who needs to learn to live again." The journey to the refuge took 2 hours that felt like 2 centuries of uncertainty. Citlali delirious between consciousness and oblivion, murmuring words in Spanish that Nikali partially understood. She spoke of someone named Villegas, of pain that was an ocean without shores, of wanting to die free rather than live as a slave. Her story was written in moans that broke souls. When they reached the camp, hidden in the canyon's natural caves, Nikali carried Citlali to the largest cave where he had built a home for his heart's orphans. He laid her on deer skins that smelled of hearth smoke and untold stories. His expert hands began cleaning wounds while children ran to fetch water and medicinal herbs. "Help me," he murmured, working to save a life that hung by a thread thinner than spider's web. "Yoretzi, bring blankets. Itzel, stoke the fire. Itzel, find the herb of life." They worked like a team forged by shared loss, small hands helping large hands in a healing ritual that transcended words. The tribe watched them with a mixture of curiosity and distrust that cut the air like a knife. A Mexican woman in an Apache refuge was trouble waiting to explode. Tlacael, a warrior marked by battle scars, muttered words that were poison disguised as caution. "Mexican brings soldiers, death, destruction of everything we've built." "Children see what we blind ones cannot see," responded Papalat, an elderly healer whose wisdom was a deep river running beneath calm surface. "But seeing isn't enough. If she's going to stay, she must prove her heart is Apache, regardless of where her body was born." Her words were sentence and hope mixed like bitter medicine that saves lives. When Citlali finally opened her eyes that night, she found herself surrounded by 4 pairs of pupils that shone like stars in a cave lit by sacred fire. For a moment she believed she had died and found an unexpected paradise where angels had children's faces and warriors offered water like divine communion. "Where?" she murmured with a voice that was a whisper of dry leaves. "You're safe," Nekali responded in broken but kind Spanish that she had forgotten existed. "You were dying in the desert. We brought you here so you could learn to live again." His words were balm on wounds that had been bleeding from her soul. "We are Apache," said Itzel with pride that shone like gold in her childish voice. "I'm Itzel, she's Yuretsi, he's Akatal, and he's our papa, Nekali." Their names sounded like celestial music in ears that had heard only insults and threats for months. The word Apache should have terrified her, but she only felt gratitude that was an ocean of peace. The following days were a trial by fire, where each dawn brought a new opportunity to prove worth that wasn't measured in silver coins. Citlali worked from before dawn until long after sunset, desperate to prove she deserved the miracle of being alive. She ground corn until her fingers bled, tanned hides until her back was a column of pain, gathered medicinal plants until her feet were maps of wounds. But some tribal women looked at her with eyes that were poisoned knives cutting newly born hope. "Tortillas too thick," Tepeyolotl murmured with contempt that dripped like pus. "Mexican women don't know how to make real food." Each criticism was a lash on a spirit trying to heal but bleeding with every cruel word. The knowledge her grandmother had bequeathed her as sacred inheritance proved to be a lifeline in an ocean of hostility. When a warrior returned with an infected wound threatening his life, Citlali immediately recognized signs of blood poisoning she had seen before. "Comfrey and echinacea," she murmured, preparing a poultice that could save a life or condemn her own if she failed. "How does a Mexican know Apache medicine?" Tlacol growled with distrust that was a serpent coiling around necks. "Because plants don't know borders," Citlali responded with dignity she had found in the depths of her shattered soul. "Medicine is medicine, suffering is suffering, healing is healing." Her words were seeds planted in prejudice's arid soil. When the warrior began healing under care that mixed Mexican wisdom with Apache necessity, some hearts began to soften like wax near fire. But the real test came when Ecatl, the 4-year-old who had touched her soul from the first moment, began showing symptoms that froze the entire tribe's blood. It was a spring afternoon when the child began complaining of pain that was a serpent writhing in his small stomach. At first they thought he had eaten something bad, but when vomiting came accompanied by fever that burned like red-hot iron, terror seized hearts that had lost too many children before. "Desert sickness," Itpapalotl murmured, preparing traditional remedies with hands that trembled like leaves in a storm. "We've buried little ones from this." Her words were funeral bells tolling premature death. Citlali observed the symptoms with eyes that had seen enough pain to recognize truth others couldn't see. "It's not sickness," she shouted, approaching the child like a mother tigress protecting her cub. "It's baby snake venom. Look at his ankle, tiny marks almost invisible." Her fingers pointed to 2 red dots that could have been insect bites to inexperienced eyes. But she knew that death sometimes comes in packages smaller than hope. "Baby snake," Nekali murmured, feeling the world sway under his feet. "More concentrated venom than in adults." His voice broke like a dry branch under the weight of paternal terror. "I have to suck the venom and make a tourniquet," Citlali declared, already acting without waiting for permission, risking her own life to save another's. For the first time since her arrival, no one questioned the authority of a woman who had been discarded like trash, but who shone like gold under crisis fire. She worked with the desperation of a mother who prefers to die trying to save her child than to live knowing she didn't do everything possible. She sucked venom from the small wound, spitting it out like dragon saliva, prepared antidotes with the precision of a healer born to save lives. The battle for Isatl's life lasted all night like a war between light and darkness, where each of the child's breaths was a small victory against death that lurked like a hungry wolf. Citlali didn't leave his side for a moment, administering medicines like a priestess in sacred ritual, monitoring vital signs like a sentinel guarding the world's most precious treasure. When dawn painted the sky gold and rose, Itkatl opened his eyes asking for water, with a voice weak but clear as victory bells. A collective sigh filled the cave like a prayer answered by gods who still believed in miracles. The child would live, and with him lived the hope of a woman who had learned that maternal love doesn't need a fertile womb but a heart that chooses to love. "Mama," Itkatl murmured, extending little arms that were invisible chains binding hearts forever. A simple word that contained universes of meaning, a declaration of love that transcended blood and race. Itzl and Yaretsi joined the embrace, creating a circle of family that had been born from choice, not obligation. Citlali wept tears that were rain after deadly drought, each drop washing away years of pain that had poisoned her soul. She had found what she never consciously sought, a family that loved her for who she was, not for what she could give. Her sterile womb had become a fertile heart capable of love that multiplied like loaves and fishes in everyday miracle. Nikali observed the family embrace, feeling ice in his heart begin to melt like a glacier touched by spring sun. This woman had saved his son's life, had returned laughter to his home, had brought light where only shadows had dwelt before, and he began to realize she could heal the wound that Tlali's death had left bleeding in his soul. That night, under stars that shone like diamonds in black velvet, they sat by the stream where water whispered secrets to patient stones. "Thank you," Nikali murmured with a voice that was prayer, "not just for saving Ikali, for saving all of us." His words floated in the night air like incense of gratitude. "They saved me," Citlali responded, touching water that reflected stars like God's tears. "I never thought I could be a mother, but these children taught me that motherhood comes from the heart, not the womb." Her voice was music that healed invisible wounds. In that moment, both felt something changing between them, something that promised to heal both their broken hearts. Months passed, like seasons of the soul, each day bringing new blessing that bloomed in the desert of healed hearts. Citlali established an herbal medicine system that combined Mexican wisdom with Apache knowledge, creating remedies that saved countless lives. Her reputation grew like a tree in an oasis, extending hope's shadow over families that had known only pain. The three children flourished under love that was constant sun in their soul's garden. Itzl learned healing secrets that her new mother guarded like treasures, small hands mixing medicines with artist's precision. Yaretsi developed special sensitivity for others' emotions, consoling broken hearts with wisdom that transcended years. Itkatl became Citlali's constant shadow, following her like a puppy that knows true love. But the past is a beast that never stops hunting. And one spring day came news that froze blood like serpent's venom running through veins. An Apache scout galloped toward camp with eyes full of terror that cut air like a knife. "Mexican soldiers are approaching," he gasped while his horse foamed from desperate gallop. "They come with a civilian man, fat, asking for a woman named Citlali." Citlali's world swayed like a sandcastle, touched by a giant wave. Villegas had found her trail, like a bloodhound, following scent after months of patient search. Familiar terror spread through her veins like liquid ice, reminding her that freedom was a fragile illusion that could break with one word. "It's because of me," she murmured, feeling guilt crushing her like a mountain of stones. "I've brought death to my family." The three children grouped around her like cubs protecting their mother, faces showing determination that broke hearts. "We won't let them take you," Itzl declared with a voice that was steel-tempered in fire. "You're our mama." Nekali studied the horizon where dust rose like a storm cloud, promising destruction. 30 soldiers against 15 warriors. Possible but costly in Apache blood that was too precious to spill for a despicable man's revenge. "We could fight," he murmured, calculating probabilities like a general before battle, "but children could become orphans again." "No Apache blood will be spilled for me," Citlali declared. Straightening with dignity she had learned in months of freedom. "I've lived more happiness here than in all previous years. If I must die, I'll die knowing I was truly loved." Her words were a sword cutting through thick air of desperation. But Itkatl, the child who had been at death's edge, clung to her skirt with fists trembling with determination. "You can't leave," he cried with tears that were rivers of childish agony. "Mama doesn't leave. Dead people can't leave if you stay alive." His words unleashed something primitive in Citlali's heart, maternal force that roared like a lioness protecting cubs. The plan they traced was desperate but brilliant, as diamond in coal. Children would be taken to the deepest caves, hidden behind stone curtains that concealed secret passages known only to Apaches. Citlali would surrender voluntarily, but with a condition. Villegas would never suspect, provoke him to hit her before soldiers, giving legal justification for Apache defense. When the caravan arrived like vultures descending on carrion, Citlali waited in the center of the tribal circle, dressed in her finest Apache clothes, flanked by warriors who seemed carved from stone and fury. Villegas dismounted with a triumphant smile that faded when he saw his former slave's transformation into Desert Queen. "Citlali Sandoval," he roared with a voice trying to sound authoritative, but cracking like rotten branch. "You've caused many problems. It's time to return where you belong." His words fell like spit in tense silence. "My name is Citlali of the Apaches," she responded with a voice that was music compared to his grunts. "And I belong here." "A savage cannot be husband to a Christian woman," he spat, looking at Nikali with contempt that dripped like pus. "You are my property." He pulled out wrinkled papers like false gods' proclamations. The Mexican captain studied the scene with tired eyes of a man who knew the world's complexity. "Señor Villegas, the woman seems to be here by her own choice." "Choice?" Villegas roared, approaching with his cane raised like a weapon. "A woman has no right to choose. I'll teach you what happens when my properties rebel." The cane descended toward her face like an attacking serpent, but never reached its destination. Nikali intercepted the blow while his hand closed around the throat like an iron vise. In Apache territory, he growled with a voice that was contained thunder. "Whoever strikes a married woman declares war on the entire tribe." Soldiers raised rifles, finding themselves staring at the points of a dozen arrows. Tension thickened like coagulating blood, while both groups prepared for massacre no one wanted. Citlali did something unexpected. She approached Villegas, who trembled like a leaf in Nikali's claw. "Fortunato," she murmured, using his name like poisonous caress. "Do you see the broken woman you bought? Do you see the slave you thought you possessed?" Her eyes shone with inner light that terrified him more than all Apache weapons combined. "That woman died in the desert," she continued, each word falling like acid drops. "What you see is something you could never create. I am a woman who chose her own life, who found true love, who raised children, not born from blood, but living in heart." Villegas tried to speak, but words choked as if he had swallowed desert sand. "I was sterile according to men's laws," she continued, her voice growing with each word. "But my heart turned out to be the world's most fertile soil. Love grew where you sowed hatred, family where you planted loneliness, freedom where you built prisons." The captain approached with hands raised in peace. "Are you here by your own will?" "For love," she responded without taking her eyes off Villegas. The officer nodded, turning to Villegas with disgust. "Case closed, sir. We have no authority to force someone to abandon a freely chosen life." Villegas collapsed, falling to his knees like a man seeing his death. "But my debts," he whimpered. "Without her I have no way to pay them. They'll kill me for what I owe." Citlali looked down at him with compassion. He didn't deserve, but that she had learned from children who loved her unconditionally. "Fortunato," she said softly, "the problem was never that I had no value. The problem was that you never understood what true value consisted of. You sought something you could use when you needed to learn that people aren't objects to be bought and sold." While soldiers prepared to leave, dragging Villegas like a sack of broken bones, 3 children emerged from hiding, like small ghosts materializing from rocks. They ran toward Citlali with cries of joy that filled the canyon with celestial music that healed invisible wounds of the soul. "Mama," Ikadal shouted, jumping into her arms with the force of a small hurricane. "I knew you wouldn't leave. I knew you wouldn't abandon us." Itzel and Yoretzi joined the embrace, creating a circle of love stronger than any fortress built by human hands. For a moment it seemed the nightmare had ended, and the family could live in peace forever. But destiny is a cruel writer who never allows completely happy endings. 2 years later, When past scars seemed healed and love had bloomed like a garden in the desert, came a letter that would change everything again. An Apache messenger brought news from a distant city that froze blood like venom running through veins. Citlali's parents had died in a cart accident, crushed under wheels that turned like implacable fate. Her younger brother Joaquin, the only remaining living relative, was desperately searching for her. He had inherited enormous debts and needed her to return to sign papers that would save family lands from being confiscated by hungry banks. "It's a trap," Talakael growled, reading the letter with distrust that cut air like rusty knife. Mexicans lie like serpents speak, with forked tongue and poison in words. But Citlali recognized Joaquin's handwriting. Her brother, 5 years younger, who had been her only ally in the family that sold her like cattle. "It's not a trap," she murmured, feeling her heart split like crystal under hammer. "Joaquin would never lie. He was the only one who cried when they took me away." Tears ran down her cheeks like rivers of pain she couldn't stop. Her little brother, who had been her faithful shadow during childhood, needed help only she could give. The decision tortured her like red-hot iron applied to bare skin. If she went, she could save the lands where her grandmother had taught healing secrets she now used to heal Apache hearts. But she could also fall into authorities' trap, who still considered her escape as property theft. If she didn't go, Joaquin would lose everything and remain in ruin that could kill him. "You can't go," Necali declared with a voice that was approaching storm thunder. "It's too dangerous. They're waiting for you like wolves wait for lost lamb." His hands took her face with gentleness that contrasted with his words' fierceness. "I can't lose you when I've barely learned to love you without reservations." But Ecatl, now 6 years old and wiser than many adults, approached with eyes that had seen death up close and had chosen life. "Mama," he said with a voice that was sad but beautiful music, "if you don't help your brother, your heart will bleed forever. And we don't want you to bleed inside where we can't heal." His words were a sword piercing Citlali's heart. The child understood what adults couldn't see, that true love sometimes requires sacrifice, that hurts but is necessary to keep the soul clean. "And if I don't return," she whispered with broken voice, "and if this is the last time we see each other, then we'll carry your love in our hearts until we meet in a place where there's no separation." Itzel responded with wisdom of her 11 years that broke souls. "But we believe you'll return because you're our mama, and real mamas always find their way back home." The departure was like dying while alive, each step taking her away from chosen family, feeling like knife-cutting living flesh. Necali accompanied her to Apache territory border, his eyes engraving every detail of beloved face as if it were the last time he'd see it. "Come back to me," he murmured, kissing her forehead with reverence of man touching sacred relic. "Always," she promised with a voice that was sacred oath. "In this life or the next, I'll always return to you." But as she rode toward Mexico, terror grew in her chest like malignant tumor. What if Necali found another woman during absence? What if children forgot her and learned to love new mother? What if she herself died on journey and promise remained broken forever? The reunion with Joaquin was mixture of joy and pain that tore soul in opposite directions. Her brother had grown into young man, but eyes showed suffering that had aged him prematurely. "Sister," he cried, embracing her like shipwrecked person embraces lifesaver. "I thought you were dead. Papa and Mama never said what really happened to you." "They sold me," she responded with voice that was ice cutting warm air. "Like cattle that no longer served any purpose." Joaquin paled as if he had seen ghost. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I thought you had married and gone to live far away." "If I had known." "It doesn't matter anymore," she interrupted, though pain remained alive, like embers under ash. The papers she needed to sign were in government office that smelled of corruption and fear. Fat official looked at her with eyes that were leeches, sucking hope. "Citlali Sandoval," he murmured, consulting yellowed documents. "There's an arrest warrant against you for property theft and flight from legal authority." The world swayed under her feet, like earthquake destroying hope's foundations. "Arrest warrant," she murmured, feeling familiar terror running through veins like liquid ice. "Yes, The official smiled with malice that dripped like pus. Fortunato Villegas filed formal charges. You are stolen property that must be returned or punished. But the captain said, she began, remembering words of officer who had closed case. Captain Mendoza was transferred to distant post. The official interrupted with smile promising torments. New commander sees things differently. Law is law, and you violated law by fleeing from legal master. Bertien straightened with courage he didn't know he possessed. My sister is a free woman, he declared with voice that trembled but didn't break. She cannot be anyone's property. Your sister is fugitive criminal, the official replied, and you'll be arrested as accomplice if you interfere with justice. The trap closed like hungry wolf's jaws. Citlali could sign papers and save Joaquin's lands, but would be arrested immediately after. Or she could flee again, but then her brother would lose everything and possibly be punished for helping her. There was no exit that didn't cost blood and tears. I'll sign, she decided with voice that was steel-tempered in sacrifice fire. Joaquin won't pay for my decisions. No, her brother shouted. I won't let them arrest you for saving me. But she had already taken the pen with hand that didn't tremble. Some prices are worth paying, she murmured, writing name that could be death sentence. Guards arrested her before ink dried on paper, handcuffs closing around wrists like condemned woman's shackles. Citlali Sandoval, declared sergeant reading charges. You are arrested for property theft, flight from legal authority, and resistance to justice. You will be transported to prison where you'll await trial. Joaquin cried like child, watching mother die, but lands were saved, and that was all that mattered. Now, take care of the land, she shouted as they dragged her toward cart that would be her mobile tomb. Plant it with love, not tears. Her words were last blessing before door closed like coffin lid. Prison was hole in earth, where hope went to die slowly. Humid cells smelled of desperation and human excrement. Walls stained with blood of previous prisoners who had clawed stone trying to escape. Citlali sat on cold floor, embracing knees, while tears fell like rain in desert. Was it worth it? She asked herself in silence that was more deafening than screams. She had saved Joaquin's lands, but had lost family she loved more than life itself. Necali would be waiting for return that might never come. Children would grow wondering why chosen mama had abandoned them when they needed her most. Days became weeks that crawled like snails, leaving bitter slime trail. Other prisoners told her stories of women who had waited years for trials, some dying of disease before cases were resolved. Mexican justice was mildew that ground human bones to make suffering flour. But one full moon night, when desperation threatened to drown her like swollen river, she heard sound that made heart jump like caged bird seeing freedom, horse hooves galloping toward prison, followed by guard screams that sounded like celestial music. Attack! We're being attacked. Cell walls trembled when explosion shook building like artificial earthquake. Smoke and dust filled air while battle cries mixed with wounded's moans. Through small window, Citlali saw dark figures moving like vengeance ghosts, arrows flying like death birds, seeking enemies' hearts. Necali appeared in cell doorway like avenging angel sent by Apache gods, face painted for war and eyes shining with fury that could melt iron. I came for you, he growled, cutting bars with axe that gleamed like lightning. No one takes my wife and lives to tell about it. How did you know? She murmured as he carried her in arms like she was world's most precious treasure. Joaquin rode day and night to find us, he responded, running toward horses waiting like patient shadows. He cried like river asking us to save you. Children threatened to follow me if I didn't come. The escape was gallop toward freedom that tasted of blood and gunpowder. Behind them prison burned like giant bonfire illuminating night with Apache justice glow. But Citlali knew they had crossed line with no return. Now they were true fugitives, wanted for real crimes they had committed to be together. What will become of us? She asked as they rode toward mountains promising temporary safety. We'll be free, Necali responded with voice that was sacred promise. Free to love, free to live, free to raise children in peace. Everything else doesn't matter. When they reached camp, 3 small figures ran toward them, like arrows seeking target's heart. "Mama!" they shouted in unison, embracing her with force, threatening to break ribs, but healing invisible soul wounds. "We knew you'd return," Ekenel murmured against her neck. "Real mamas always come back." But family reunion was interrupted by news that froze blood like Arctic wind. Scouts reported Mexican army approaching, not small patrol, but complete expeditionary force, with orders to capture or kill all Apaches involved in prison attack. War had officially begun. "We'll have to separate." Tribal council decided that night around fire that seemed smaller, under weight of impossible decisions. Families with children will go north. Warriors will fight to give them time to escape. Words fell like ash on peace, hopes they had carefully built during years. Citlali straightened with determination that surprised even hardest warriors. "No," she declared with voice cutting air like sharp sword. "I won't be separated from my family again. If we're going to die, we'll die together. If we're going to live, we'll live together. But there will be no more separations." "It's too dangerous," Nikali protested, but she looked at him with eyes that were fire-consuming doubts. "Everything in life is dangerous," she responded, taking hands of 3 children who looked at her with soul-breaking adoration. "But true love faces danger together, not separately." The flight toward unknown territory began before dawn. Caravan of Apache families moving like shadows through landscape that became more hostile with each mile. Citlali rode with Iketal in arms, while Itzel and Uretzi shared nearby horse, all united by invisible threads of love no earthly force could break. But Mexican army pursued them like pack of rabid dogs following blood trail. Each passing day, distance shortened like rope around neck. Children and elders tired, horses limped, provisions ran out like sand falling through time, clock running out. One afternoon, when sun began setting, painting sky, blood color, scouts returned with news that stopped hearts like clenched fists. "Soldiers are half-day away," they informed with voices that were death whispers. "We won't be able to maintain advantage with children and elders." Nekali gathered bravest warriors that night, when stars shone like ancestors' eyes watching from sky. "Some of us must stay behind," he declared with voice breaking like dry branch. "Fight to death, to give families time to escape. It's the only way." "I'll stay," offered Tlakel, warrior who had distrusted Citlali, but now respected her like sister. "My wife died last year. Children are grown. My life for their lives is fair trade." Others nodded, men who had decided to turn their deaths into life gifts for others. Citlali embraced each staying warrior, tears flowing like rivers of mixed gratitude and pain. "Your names will live in our children's hearts," she promised with voice that was sacred oath. "Your sacrifices won't be forgotten while we have memory." Final separation was like being torn to pieces while still alive. Nikali kissed her with desperation of man knowing it might be last kiss, lips engraving memory that would have to last eternity if fate separated them forever. "I love you," he murmured, "in this life and all that come." "And I you," she responded, feeling heart split, but not break completely. "Take care of our children if I don't return." "Take care of yourself," he replied with smile that was sun-piercing storm clouds. "Because these children need mother who teaches them love is stronger than fear." The last months had been endless flight through deserts and mountains that knew no mercy. Citlali had learned to sleep with one eye open, to find water where only rocks existed, to heal wounds with plants growing in impossible places. Her hands had become hard as leather, but heart remained inexhaustible love source. 3 children had grown during journey, not just in stature, but in wisdom that comes from facing adversity without losing hope. Itzel, now 12, had learned survival secrets, making her expert healer. Uretzi wove blankets with threads saved from disaster, creating beauty amid chaos. Iketal hunted rabbits with adult warrior precision. But one winter morning, when snow began falling like frozen tears from sky, Citlali woke with fever burning like internal fire. She had contracted disease other refugees carried in chest, cough producing blood, and weakness stealing strength like thief in night. "Mama is sick," Itzel murmured with terror, colder than winter wind. Citlali tried to rise, but worlds spun like crazed top, forcing her to remain lying on skins, smelling of smoke and desperation. It's just tiredness, she lied with voice that was dry leaves whisper. But illness grew like bad weed, stealing breath and color from cheeks that had recovered life during freedom years. Other refugees looked at her with eyes saying what mouths didn't dare. She was dying slowly, consumed by evil with no known cure. "You can't die," Iketal declared with firmness of child, who had decided to defy death itself. "I forbid you to die." His childish words drew smile from lips that had forgotten how to curve upward. "I don't plan to die yet, my little warrior," she murmured, stroking hair that was black silk. "I have too much to live for." But fevers worsened during nights seeming eternal, delirium taking her to places where past and present mixed like paints running under rain. She saw Villegas laughing, her parents counting coins, Nikali calling her from distance she couldn't cross. "Where are you?" she screamed in dreams. "Why don't you come for me?" One night, when death seemed ready to claim her as patient lover, Citlali opened eyes, finding face she thought she'd never see again. Nikali knelt beside her, eyes shining with tears he had denied shedding before others. "I came," he murmured. "I always come when you need me." "Are you real?" she whispered, touching cheek with fingers trembling like leaves in wind. "Or am I just fever seeing what heart desires?" "I'm as real as your love for me," he responded, kissing forehead, burning like embers. "I found your trail, followed stars, walked through hell to find you." "The warriors?" she asked, with blood-freezing terror. "Those who stayed to fight?" Shadow crossed Nikali's face like cloud-covering sun. "Tlakael died like hero," he murmured with broken voice. "Others too, but their deaths gave us necessary time to reunite. Their sacrifices saved our future." Citlali wept for brave men who had given lives so love could continue blooming in hostile desert. Each tear was prayer for souls who had chosen honorable death over cowardly life. "Their names," she whispered, "I need to remember their names to tell my grandchildren." During following days, Nikali cared for her with dedication, transcending earthly love. He gave her water drop by drop when throat closed, sang Apache songs when nightmares tormented her, told stories of future they'd build together when illness was only painful memory. "Do you know what kept me alive during battle?" he murmured one night, when stars shone like hope promises. "Knowing I had to return to you, that 3 children needed father and world's bravest woman waited for me to heal together." His words were medicine no herb could equal. Slowly, like flower opening petals under spring sun, strength returned to body that had decided to fight death once more. Fever retreated like defeated army, cough calmed like passing storm, color returned to cheeks that had been pale as moon. "You'll live," declared elderly healer who had come with Nikali's group. "Spirits decided your work on earth isn't finished." Citlali smiled, feeling truth of those words resonating in bones that had known too much pain but had chosen to heal. Following years were time of relative peace, reunited family living in Hidden Valley where water ran clear and earth was generous with harvests. Mexican government had lost interest in pursuing Apaches who had disappeared like smoke in wind, declaring them dead to close uncomfortable cases. Citlali established school where Apache children learned healing secrets she had inherited from wise grandmother. Her knowledge saved countless lives, combining Mexican wisdom with Apache traditions to create medicine that was bridge between cultures. Her reputation grew like tree, extending protective branches. Itzel married young warrior who loved her for wisdom as much as beauty, settling near adoptive parents to continue learning secrets only time and experience could teach. Her children grew hearing stories of grandmother who had been sold like cattle but had flourished as desert queen. Yuretsi found love with Apache trader who admired her weavings as much as gentle heart. Her blankets became legendary, each thread telling story of family born from choice and grown in unconditional love. Her designs mixed Mexican patterns with Apache symbols, creating art testifying cultural union. Fatal grew to become respected leader who never forgot lessons chosen mother had taught about human life value and unconditional love power. He married Apache woman who adored stories of mother-in-law who had saved husband's life when he was child at death's edge. But time is river flowing toward inevitable ocean, and Sitalali began feeling years' weight in bones that had endured too much pain and too much joy. Her hair turned silver like moon threads, hands wrinkled like maps of well-lived life, but eyes maintained brightness learned during freedom years. One autumn afternoon, when leaves fell like golden tears from tired trees, Sitalali sat with Nikali under mesquite, where they had first spoken of love decades ago. "Do you regret anything?" she asked with curiosity of woman who had reached end of long difficult road. "Only one thing," he responded, taking hand that had aged alongside his. "Not finding you sooner. All the years we lost before fate united us." He smiled with sweet sadness of man who had learned true love is worth any price paid for it. "They weren't lost years," she corrected with wisdom of woman who had lived enough to understand life patterns. "They were necessary years. I needed to be broken to learn to value healing. I needed to be sold to learn freedom's price. I needed to be sterile to discover heart's fertility." That night, under stars that had witnessed love story defying conventions, Sitalali fell asleep for last time in arms of man who had chosen to love her when world had discarded her. Her last breath was gratitude sigh for life that had begun in pain but had bloomed in joy. Nikali buried her on hill overlooking south toward Mexico where she was born and north toward Apache territory where she was reborn. 3 children, now adults with families of their own, placed stones on grave while promising that story of woman who had transformed curse into blessing would be told to future generations. Her legacy lived in hearts she had touched, in lives she had saved, in love she had planted like seeds in prejudice and hatred's arid desert. Sitalali had proven family isn't defined by blood but by choice, that motherhood doesn't require fertile womb but heart willing to love, that freedom isn't gift but conquest earned day by day. On nights when wind blows from mountains, they say you can still hear children's laughter mixing with whispers of woman who learned true love never dies, only transforms into memory that warms hearts for generations. And in that eternal laughter lives testimony that even in cruelest world, love finds way to bloom like star shining in deepest darkness.